forget how it happens. We're in a new world we don't know.
Yeah. Right. I mean, the great thing about that piece is it points out this sort of dilemma that Democrats are having of, do you want to fall in love with someone? Do you want to love the idea and think that the person's inspirational? Or do you actually want to find someone who you think has the very best chance of beating President Trump in 2020? And maybe that's not the same person, right?
We'll give every Democratic activist a home version of the magic wall. They can do their own electoral map and try to sort this out themselves. All right. It's a lot of fun. It's fascinating. Up next, waiting for the Mueller report and the tweets that tell you who sounds more than a little anxious.
Lots of investment firms talk about customizing a portfolio to your needs, but they only look at one or two aspects of your financial situation. Creative planning is different. Our financial planning-led approach considers your entire financial picture. That's the only way to create a comprehensive plan customized uniquely for you. Call 866-CREATIVE or visit creativeplanning.com and experience the difference creative planning can make. Creative planning, wealth management redefined.
To be nobody but yourself in a world which is doing its best to make you everybody else means to fight the hardest battle which any human being can fight and never stop. Does this sound dismal? It isn't. It's the most wonderful life on earth.
Before I was diagnosed by my doctor, I didn't know why my body was moving like it had a mind of its own. My eyes blinked way too much, even though I didn't mean to. It turns out I have tardive dyskinesia, a condition that may be related to important medications I take for my bipolar disorder. My fingers moved like they were playing a piano that wasn't there. I was embarrassed that others could see my movements. My doctor said tardive dyskinesia can affect different parts of the body. It may also affect people who take medication for depression and schizophrenia. I know I shouldn't change or stop my medication, so I was glad to learn that TD is manageable.
If this sounds like you or someone you know, visit talkabouttd.com or call 1-800-821-3629 to receive a free brochure that describes the uncontrollable movements of TD and where on the body they might occur. You'll find a free discussion guide with ways to start a conversation with your doctor about how TD might be affecting you.
It's a relief to know that today, TD is manageable. Learn more at talkabouttd.com.
The Labrador Retriever and the Golden Retriever are very different. They eat, digest, and process energy differently. At Royal Canin, we developed over 200 precise formulas to transform every cat and dog into a magnificent animal. Royal Canin.
VisuWorks can do more than just make you see great. The right pair of glasses can make you look amazing, too.
And our buy one, get one free sale is a great time to get a backup pair for when you leave them on a plane, at the game, or at that restaurant. VisionWorks, we're here to help you.
Are you an ocean?
No.
Are you edible?
No.
Can't sleep.
Me neither.
Number one.
Woo.
With Shark's Duo Clean, I don't just clean, I deep clean carpets and floors. So I got this. Yep, this too. And this? Please. Even long hair and pet hair are no problem. But the one thing I won't have to clean is this. Because the Shark self-cleaning brush roll removes the hair wrap while I clean.
Shark, the vacuum that deep cleans, now cleans itself.
As all of Washington waits for the Mueller report, the person with the most at stake isn't trying to hide his anxiety or his anger. Friday morning tweet raging from President Trump, including calling the special counsel investigation illegal. Robert Mueller, the president says, quote, should never have been appointed, and, quote, there should be no Mueller report. The president's anger related to the Mueller investigation and beyond continues throughout the weekend. Yesterday, tweeting this about the dossier and connecting it to the late Senator John McCain. Spreading the fake and totally discredited dossier, unfortunately, a very dark stain against John McCain. He had far worse stains than this, including thumbs down and repeal and replace after years of campaigning to repeal and replace. Just moments ago, on this Sunday morning, the president continuing, so it was indeed, just proven in court papers, last in his class, Annapolis, John McCain, who sent the fake dossier to the FBI and the media, hoping to have it printed before the Dems.
Wow.
Yeah, it's you may have grievances against Senator McCain, but he's a hero. He's been dead for 7 months.
And saying last in his class, that's stunning. And also,
let me stop you for 1 second.
Yes.
This is a president who's consistently refused to release his own grades. If you want to bring up others, maybe you should give us yours.
Exactly. And also, he's frankly passing on false claims and lies about John McCain on several fronts. He's almost making it seem like that John McCain was responsible for the Russia investigation. That's not what happened in the way that his involvement in the dossier, which is pretty limited, to suggest as the president is suggesting here. Also saying that he was responsible yesterday for scuttling the repeal and replace effort. That's not what happened at all. What happened was that he was one of the senators who voted against advancing a very narrow repeal plan of the Obamacare. Very narrow. They were nowhere near on a replacement. They couldn't even necessarily get that narrow plan through Congress because they had to still conference that with the House. But details aside, he still is going after him, and also going after, quote, his many, quote, stains. This is someone who has been revered by both parties, who was hailed after his death as a war hero. The president can't let it go.
Yeah, and it'd be interesting. Again, normally when the president does this, you get crickets from the Republican Party. It'd be interesting to see if somebody stands up and says, really? Meghan McCain did stand up yesterday, tweeting, "No one will ever love you the way they loved my father. I wish I had been given more Saturdays with him. Maybe spend yours with your family instead of being on Twitter obsessing over mine."
It does sort of beg the question, what is the president doing all weekend? Is he sitting at home in the White House watching TV and getting riled up about, what he believes to be fake news and persecution from prosecutors, and why he's not sort of taking a more presidential, approach? I mean, this is someone who has access to, the best scholars and the best experts on any issue that you could imagine. And he could, have dinner with the top leaders of the world. But instead, it seems that he's watching TV and getting, emotional about the Russia investigation and not focusing on the things that matter to the country.
And the anger, we were talking about the tweets about Senator McCain, which are just incomprehensible in the sense that I understand you're mad. He voted against you on health care. Okay. It's a long time ago. Move on. He was an American hero. But the Mueller anger, again, it's not new, but that it came up Friday again, illegal, should never have been appointed. There is anticipation the Mueller report could come any day now. Does the president know more than we know, or is that just he's trying to, again, stoke his base so that if there's something damaging in it, his attitude is don't believe it?
Well, I mean, I think that's part of it, right? But I do think that both in the tweets about John McCain and in this sort of renewed sense of anger and panic about Mueller, what you see is that he really does feel under siege. I mean, I think part of this is definitely he's talking to the base by bringing up John McCain. I think part of that is talking to the very conservative Republican base that never liked John McCain, that thought that John McCain, lost an election, and threw away an election. But I do think a lot of it is very personal to him, and the fact that he feels under siege and he sees this in very black and white terms, very simplistic terms that have nothing to do with the actual details of how the dossier came forward, nothing to do with the actual substance of what Mueller is investigating, but just very black and white. They're after me, they're coming to get me, and I'm hitting back. And I think that's a lot of what you're seeing here. And he knows, of course, as the rest of us, are gathering, that Mueller is wrapping things up, and this is going to be the time when he is feeling most under threat, and rightly so.
So his former campaign chairman gets sentenced additionally, 7.5 years. So Paul Manafort will spend time in jail, saw some court developments. All right, we'll see what happens in the week ahead. Our reporters share from their notebooks next, including the House Speaker's next battle, trade. But first, Nancy Pelosi's unique take on today, St. Patrick's Day.
Most of us were in school with Irish Catholic nuns who taught us about the Kennedys and the Irish American contribution. And St. Patrick's Day was a very important day to us. It was important because we were honoring St. Patrick, but as an Italian American, I was always taught that St. Patrick was Italian.
Fact is, there are over 9,600 roads named Park in the U.S. It's America's most popular street name, no matter what park you live on. one of 10,000 local Allstate agents knows yours. Now that you know the truth, are you in good hands?
The F-Pace, the SUV with the heart of a Jaguar. For great offers, visit your Jaguar retailer during the Impeccable Timing sales event.
You might take something for your heart or joints, but do you take something for your brain? With an ingredient originally discovered in jellyfish, Prevagen has been shown in clinical trials to improve short-term memory. Prevagen, healthier brain, better life.
Sir, you're a broker. What do you charge for online equity trades?
I'll look into it. Lisa Jones.
Hey, Carl, what are you charging me for online equity trades? And do I get my fees back if I'm not happy, like a satisfaction guarantee?
Schwab.
Oh, right, I'm calling Schwab. Thanks, Carl.
Wait, Lisa. Lisa.
Are you getting low cost backed by a satisfaction guarantee? If not, talk to Schwab, a modern approach to wealth management.
Pardon the interruption, but this is big. Now at T-Mobile, get the Samsung Galaxy S10e included with unlimited data for just $40 a month.
If you have a garden, you know weeds are low-down little scoundrels. Don't stoop to their level. Draw the line with the Roundup Sure Shot wand. It extends with a protective shield and targets weeds more precisely. It lets you kill what's bad right down to the root while guarding the good. Roundup Sure Shot wand. And to stop weeds before they start, also try Roundup Landscape Weed Preventer. Roundup brand. Trusted for over 40 years.
Fact is, there are over 9,600 roads named Park in the U.S. It's America's most popular street name. No matter what park you live on, one of 10,000 local Allstate agents knows yours. Now that you know the truth, are you in good hands?
Others may hate you, but those who hate you don't win unless you hate them. And then you destroy yourself.
Looks great, right? But who's got time for that? At Daily Harvest, we do all the work, so you don't have to. Meet Daily Harvest. We handpick organic ingredients for our smoothies, soups, and harvest bowls. Delivered to your door. Ready in minutes. So you can dig in. Go to dailyharvest.com and get started today.
Hi, we're Warby Parker, an eyewear company that offers high-quality glasses starting at $95, including prescription lenses. Our frames are designed in-house and made from premium materials like cellulose acetate and lightweight titanium, and include scratch-resistant and anti-reflective lens coatings. It may sound too good to be true, but we believe glasses can be well-made, stylish, and affordable, and have set out to prove that with every pair. Try 5 frames for free today at warbyparker.com.
The Bush Years, tonight at 10 on CNN.
Closed captioning brought to you by Mesobook.com.
We offer a free book on mesothelioma. Call for the free book and receive so much more. Call 1-800-831-3700.
Let's head one more time around the Inside Politics table. Ask our great reporters to share a little something from their notebooks. Get you out ahead of the big political news just around the corner. Julie?
Well, Senator Mitch McConnell set the stage last week for a debate on the Green New Deal in the Senate before the end of the month. I think we all can stipulate that there is not going to be a large new Green New Deal package that becomes law this year, but this is going to be the forum for a big politically charged debate over what the priorities are, whether the two parties think that climate change is real and what we should do about it. There's obviously a ton of energy on the Democratic side and in the Democratic primary around this issue. And Chuck Schumer, the minority leader, has decided to just lean into this. But this is going to be a very difficult debate for Democrats who now have to decide what to do about a plan that a lot of their candidates have embraced, but the specifics of which are a little bit more politically difficult. They're talking about all voting present potentially and voting for, and they've put out a resolution just basically declaring that climate change is real, which is a bare minimum. But Democrats are going to have to figure out what they are for before this vote takes place.
Going to be a lot of fun. A debate worth having. We'll see how it plays out. Manu?
John, there's not going to be much bipartisan legislating in this divided Congress, but there's one issue that has somewhat of a chance. That's to deal with the revised NAFTA agreement that the president has put forward. The U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer has been moving behind the scenes and meeting with House Democrats to try to alleviate their concerns. And the big question going forward is how does that Nancy Pelosi deal with this? She, in a closed-door meeting last week, I'm told she raised concerns about environmental protections, labor protections in dealing with opioids. She also raised concerns about the president's remarks about walking away from the NAFTA deal in that closed-door meeting. For Pelosi, the big question going forward is, what do you do here? Do you get behind a potential bipartisan win, give the president a bipartisan win, something that he could campaign on going into the 2020 elections? Or do you raise concerns and dig in about the issues that you're concerned about and try to fight it and take it to the voters going forward? Still a lot of questions about whether Republicans could get behind it, whether it could pass the Senate. But Pelosi's decision, critical about when she'll get behind it, if she'll get behind it, or if she'll fight it.
Politics of trade, a lot of fun. We'll watch this one. Tolu?
I spoke to Mayor Pete Buttigieg a couple of days ago, and it was really interesting that he said that he wants to speak more about his religious faith as part of the Democratic primary. He wants to promote that and talk a little bit more about religion. You're hearing more about this from Democrats, including Senator Cory Booker, Senator Kamala Harris, even Senator Bernie Sanders, going to churches, talking about faith and sort of talking about the 2020 election as a battle for the soul of America. It gives them an opportunity to draw a contrast with President Trump, who gets a lot of support from specifically white evangelical voters, but does not sort of personally come across as someone who's pious. And I think Democrats are thinking that they can dig into some of President Trump's support by talking about their own personal faith and talking about how the faith of their personal politics can translate into their policy platform as well.
Well, another interesting wrinkle in a very interesting Democratic race. Lisa?
So we spent some time on this show talking about Beto O'Rourke. I am leaving from this table and going to see another presidential candidate, Elizabeth Warren, who will be in Memphis and then Mississippi before doing a CNN town hall tomorrow night. And in a way, she's sort of like the anti-Beto. And the contrast between Senator Warren and Mr. O'Rourke, I think, illustrates a lot of the choices faced by Democratic primary voters. It's generational. He's quite a bit younger than her. It's policy. She's really led the field in policy specifics, coming out this weekend with a plan on housing, last weekend with a plan on breaking up tech companies. He's taken some criticism for being a little gauzier about where he stands on different policies. And it's vision. He's really talked a lot about coming together, and she's really been focused on naming what she sees as the people holding back progress, the ultra wealthy, big corporations. So the contrast between those candidates will really tell us a lot about where Democratic primary voters are going forward.
That's what makes the race so much fun, even though it's early. I'll close with what you might call deja vu all over again for Republicans in Alabama. It was a Republican mess, you will remember, back in 2017 that helped Democrat Doug Jones to his stunning win in a special Senate election. Jones is now running for a full term in 2020 and is the most vulnerable incumbent Democrat. Establishment Republicans recruited GOP Congressman Bradley Byrne to run and are betting Alabama will be extra red in a presidential year. But their hope that Byrne would get a clear shot is fading. The party's controversial 2017 candidate, former state Supreme Court Chief Justice Roy Moore, is stirring talk. He may run again. And the Conservative Club for Growth released a poll to Alabama media this past week as part of its argument that conservative Congressman Mo Brooks is a stronger contender than establishment favorite Byrne. One veteran GOP strategist described the Alabama maneuvering as, quote, another clown car. It's a race worth watching and proof some internal GOP feuds predate President Trump. That's it for Inside Politics. Hope you can catch us weekdays as well. We're here at noon Eastern. Up next, don't go anywhere. A very busy State of the Union with Jake Tapper. His guests include Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib of Michigan and 2020 presidential candidate Amy Klobuchar. Thanks again for sharing your Sunday with us. Have a great day.
With my hepatitis C, I felt I couldn't be at my best for my family. In only 8 weeks with Mavyret, I was cured and left those doubts behind.
I faced reminders of my hep C every day, but in only 8 weeks with Mavyret, I was cured.
Even hanging with friends, I worried about my hep C, but in only 8 weeks with Mavyret, I was cured.
Mavyret is the only 8-week cure for all common types of Hep C. Before starting Mavyret, your doctor will test if you've had hepatitis B, which may flare up and cause serious liver problems during and after treatment. Tell your doctor if you've had hepatitis B, a liver or kidney transplant, other liver problems, HIV-1, or other medical conditions, and all medicines you take, including herbal supplements. Don't take Mavyret with atazanavir or rifampin, or if you've had certain liver problems. Common side effects include headache and tiredness. With Hep C behind me, I feel free.
Fearless.
There's no looking back, because I am cured.
Talk to your doctor about Mavyret.
We're in the hands of the people. Hands that aren't afraid of hard work. Hands that love. And hands that do what they love. Maxwell House. Good to the last drop.
The third stair always creaked, and your mother told me all her life that I should fix it. Now, it reminds me of her. I'm just glad I never fixed it.
Listen, you don't need to go anywhere, Dad. Meet Christine. She's going to help you around the house.
The best home to be in is your own. From personal care and memory care to help around the house, Home Instead offers personalized in-home services for your loved ones. Home Instead Senior Care. To us, it's personal.
The Waterpik Water Flosser. Clinically proven, the easy and most effective way to floss. Brushing only gets the surface, but the Waterpik Water Flosser cleans the areas brushing may miss. Ask your dental professional about Waterpik.
The only adventure sales event is happening now. Land Rover, above and beyond.
With Shark's Duo Clean, I don't just clean, I deep clean carpets and floors. So I got this. Yep, this too. And this? Please. Even long hair and pet hair are no problem. But the one thing I won't have to clean is this. Because the Shark self-cleaning brush roll removes the hair wrap while I clean.
Shark, the vacuum that deep cleans, now cleans itself.
A horrific terrorist attack at 2 mosques in New Zealand. The rise of hate around the world. What does it mean here at home? 2020 presidential candidate and Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar joins Jake to respond. State of the Union, next on CNN.
I had my dream career and loads of student debt. So I went to Credible.com and in 3 minutes had actual rates from multiple lenders and I saved thousands of dollars.
Visit Credible.com to see how much you could save on your student loans.
Hiring was always a huge challenge. Endless hours on job sites with not a lot to show for it. Then, I found ZipRecruiter. They figured out hiring. I post my job, they put it all over the web, and they send me the right people, because their technology is smart. ZipRecruiter often sends me the right person in 24 hours.
ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. Try it for free today at ZipRecruiter.com/fast.
Hey, I'm Zach, CEO of Roman. Some health issues are tough to talk about. With Roman, you can go online, chat with a physician, and if treatment is right for you, we'll ship FDA-approved medication right to your door. Roman, let's take care of it.
Senator Elizabeth Warren, a presidential town hall, tomorrow night at 9 Eastern, only on CNN.
Darkest days. The world mourns after a devastating terrorist attack on 2 New Zealand mosques.
This is and will be one of New Zealand's darkest days.
The heinous attacks on Muslim worshippers broadcast live on social media. U.S. Ambassador to New Zealand Scott Brown joins us next. And hate on the rise. In the wake of the New Zealand attacks, President Trump downplays the spread of white nationalism.
It's a small group of people.
But statistics show white nationalist hate is growing. We'll talk to Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, one of 3 Muslim members of Congress, in minutes. Plus, middle of the road. He's running, and Beto O'Rourke is hoping to catch fire again, this time in Iowa.
I'm running to serve you.
But a candidate from the center of her party and the country has the same goal:
Iowa has picked winners, right?
Presidential candidate Senator Amy Klobuchar joins us in moments. Hello, I'm Dick Tapper in Washington, where the State of our Union is disgusted and horrified after yet another white nationalist terrorist attack. There are now at least 50 people dead and as many injured in New Zealand after a horrific terrorist attack on 2 mosques. Overnight, the Prime Minister of New Zealand promised to take up gun reform, saying, quote, there will be changes to our gun laws. In the United States and around the world, the tragedy is reigniting questions about rising white nationalism after a so-called manifesto, purportedly from the suspected gunman, spewed anti-immigrant hate and white supremacist ideology. In the hours after the attack, President Trump condemned the killings, but he did not notably offer any direct words of support to the Muslim community here in the United States or abroad, and he did not speak out specifically against white supremacy or white nationalism. In fact, when asked if white nationalism is a growing threat around the world, the president said this.
I don't really. I think it's a small group of people that have very, very serious problems.
When the New Zealand Prime Minister was asked if she agreed with the president's comments, she said, quote, no. And statistics and data in the United States and around the world are with her, not with the president. Joining me now, the U.S. Ambassador to New Zealand, former Republican Senator from Massachusetts, Scott Brown. Mr. Ambassador, thanks again for joining us. We really appreciate it. I want to start with what we know about the terrorist who committed these attacks. We're learning he's an Australian national. He's traveled extensively, visited countries such as Bulgaria and Turkey. The Prime Minister of New Zealand said that while they monitor various hate groups, this individual was unknown to their security services. Do you know, was he ever on the radar of U.S. intelligence services?
Yeah, Jake, first of all, thank you for having me on, and thank you for covering this. No, I have no knowledge of whether he's on any type of watch list for us, and I take the Prime Minister at her word. I know they've been very thorough, obviously dealing with the victims and the families, and also making sure that the members of the Muslim community are cared for. But more importantly, they're doing the deep dive to, make sure they get the legal case strong and ready to go.
From what we've seen, Mr. Ambassador, are U.S. and other intelligence and law enforcement agencies tracking dangerous white supremacist terrorists as closely as they're tracking other threats, such as, for instance, Islamist terrorists?
Well, I can't comment on what's happening back home because, Jake, I've been here for a couple of years, and I can just say being here, and the reason I think that this person may have gone to Christchurch is because of the amazing diversity. As you know, Christchurch had an earthquake which devastated that city some time ago, and they made major efforts to rebuild and amazing inclusiveness. So, the Islamophobic attitudes of this rotten to the core terrorist really is not something that I have ever seen here in New Zealand. I think that's what's so shocking to the people of New Zealand, that Muslims in this country specifically would be targeted in this manner.
I know that President Trump has spoken with the Prime Minister of New Zealand. Have you spoken with President Trump about this attack?
I speak to obviously the White House, the Situation Room, and all parties to be on a very regular basis. Certainly, I know there's been contact from the President to the Prime Minister and the Secretary and the Vice President to the Deputy Prime Minister. All the agencies are speaking at a very, very high level. There's no need for me to specifically speak to the President because I'm here as his representative and do what I have been doing, which is making sure that whatever the New Zealand government needs, including the Prime Minister or any of the other agencies, we make sure it's available.
So the Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, said yesterday that in her phone call with President Trump, he asked her what support the U.S. could offer, and she told him, quote, sympathy and love for all Muslim communities, unquote. Now, you specifically have made a point, including in this interview, of saying that you are, quote, standing with our Muslim brothers and sisters. President Trump, it's been observed by many Muslims and others, President Trump has yet to offer any kind of message or support specifically to any Muslim community. Would you like to see him do so?
Well, as you know, Jake, I'm the President's representative here, and I have done it. We my wife and I brought 49 lilies representing the 49 deaths at that point down to the Islamic Center in my hometown. Tonight we participated in an amazing vigil with over 10,000 people, reaching out to our Muslim brothers and sisters. So I'm the representative. That's how I feel. I'd have to refer you to what's happening in Washington because, quite frankly, it seems like it's 14,000 kilometers away, which it is. So we're doing everything we can here. There's been amazing reach outs, amazing vigils, and I'm encouraging people to start in their local community. And I just want to say I want to commend you for what you and CNN are doing by posting on your, I believe it's on your .com site, of things that people can do to help. That's really important, and I encourage folks to take a peek at that.
Would it make your job easier, though? I mean, the Prime Minister has specifically said to the President that she would like to see him say something to address the Muslim community. There are American Muslims who are very concerned, Muslims worldwide who are concerned about this horrific anti-Muslim massacre. Would it make your job easier? Would you personally just like to see the President specifically say that he's standing with our Muslim brothers and sisters exactly the way you did?
Well, first of all, Jake, as you know, as a former U.S. Senator and as a diplomat now, as a member of the State Department, there's been no time in my political or diplomatic life that I have ever questioned our government, whether it's this government or any other prior government's commitment to end racism, to stop bigotry, to really deal with the Islamophobic attitudes. And not only there, but here, and especially here. Everything is focused right here, Jake, right now. And what's happening around the world really seems a little bit irrelevant, to be honest with you, because we are dealing with taking care of those Muslim brothers and sisters and family members and community members and friends that are hurting right now. So we have to make sure they're safe and secure, their loved ones can be buried properly, and then we can obviously move forward and deal with a lot of the things that we're talking about right now. But the biggest priority is to deal with this, make sure that love over hate, reach out to your local communities and do the things that are important to kind of make this country heal.
I want you to take a listen to what President Trump said when asked if white nationalism is a rising threat around the world. This is President Trump on Friday.
I don't really. I think it's a small group of people that have very, very serious problems. I guess if you look at what happened in New Zealand, perhaps that's a case. I don't know enough about it yet.
Now, experts say that white nationalism is on the rise. Obviously, right-wing nationalist parties with such tendencies have had double-digit vote totals all across Europe. The Anti-Defamation League says white supremacists carried out 78% of all extremist murders in the U.S. And when the Prime Minister of New Zealand was asked if she agreed with President Trump that it's not on the rise, this threat, she simply said no. Do you agree with the Prime Minister, or do you agree with President Trump?
Listen, I think they have their own opinions, obviously. I know what's happening here, and there seems to have been a person who had those types of tendencies, and he went out and murdered, systematically murdered women, innocent Muslim women, children, obviously, and men, and that's unacceptable. Specifically with regard to racism, as I said, I do not condone racism, whether it's white supremacist or any type of racism, and I am the president's representative, so I refer you to what he's saying. I, quite frankly, am not focused on it right now. I'm focused on what we're doing here. But as the representative and someone who's been in the federal government and now works at the State Department, there's never been any doubt that we condemn racism and all types of racism.
Sure, but do you think it's on the rise?
And extremism, obviously.
Right. But do you think it's on the rise? From what you've seen?
I haven't seen it. Jake, I've been here for almost 2 years. I haven't seen it here. That's why it's a little bit numbing. I'm trying to come up with words. I wish I could actually come up with words as to how I and others feel here right now. I can only attribute it to how I felt during Boston and the Boston bombing, being then, a New Englander. That same type of oh my gosh, what just happened? And that's what's happening right here, right now. So is there an uptick of violence? Well, there was here a couple of days ago, and we have to find a way to put that back in the bottle.
Well, we know that the terrorists cited President Trump as a symbol of white identity in his document. Obviously, the perpetrator is the only one responsible for this horrific massacre. But what did you make of the fact that he cited the president as a symbol of this?
Yeah, I don't give any credibility whatsoever to the ramblings of somebody who's rotten to the core and clearly is an extremist of the worst kind who could walk into two mosques and without any care whatsoever kill people. I don't give any credibility to it. I'm not going to read it. I encourage others not to read it. I'm not going to give him the time of day. I hope as quickly as possible they can find a way to get this guy convicted and lock him up and throw away the key. That's how I feel, and I think a lot of New Zealanders feel the same way.
Ambassador Brown, we thank you for your time and we thank you for your leadership in New Zealand in conveying the loss that we all feel and the love that we're all sending to the New Zealand community and specifically to the Muslim community in New Zealand. So thank you for that.
Well, Jake, thank you to you and your viewers, and please, help locally, start locally, reach out to your Muslim brothers and sisters, and push love over hate. That's the only way that it's going to work. So thank you very much for your time as well.
In the wake of the horrific tragedy in New Zealand, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, one of only 3 Muslim lawmakers in Congress, posted a personal response, tweeting a picture of her family and saying she hugged her, quote, 2 brown Muslim boys a little tighter and longer. And Congresswoman Tlaib is joining us now from her home state of Michigan. Congresswoman, thanks for joining us. First of all, let me just say we're all thinking about the Muslim community today and sending our support and our love. You released a statement after the attack about how difficult this is, particularly as a mother of 2 young Muslim sons. How do you talk to them about what happened on Friday?
Oh, it's so difficult. I don't know. How do you talk to your child about this? I mean, I remember my son at 9 years old hearing me talk about how USA Today had depicted Muslims as Nazis. They had done this cartoon and was talking to his father in the bedroom about how just awful that was and how people are going to want to kill us when they see this cartoon. And I was just so distressed about it. My little boy walks in and he says, Mama, don't worry. If anybody asks if I'm Muslim, I will lie and tell them I'm not. At that moment, I cried even more, realizing my son, who's 13 today, is growing up in a country where he's become a target just for his faith, just for the fact that he's Arab American. I can tell you it's very distressful. And now I'm a member of Congress, and I have to speak up, and I have to be loud and clear. And I don't care if it's anti-blackness, xenophobia, anti-Semitism, whatever form of hate. I feel like we need to really be starting to connect together on these all forms of hate against white nationalism. This is domestic terrorism. It is actually something we should be very, very much at the forefront condemning, being very loud and clear that we're going to go after you. We're going to make sure you're held accountable and that you will not target a person based on their faith, their sexual orientation, based on the color of their skin, or even their income status. I mean, we've gotten people that are being targeted from all forms of all over the country right now. It's distress, Jake. I can tell you as a mother, it's hard to sit your child down to help them understand. All I can do is come from a place of love and give them a sense of hope. There are more of us than of them, meaning more people that are coming from a place of respect and equality and justice. And if they truly believe that, then they'll feel a little bit more safer in our country.
The president condemned the attack, but he has not yet given a direct message to Muslims in the United States or around the world. You just heard Ambassador Brown talk about that. He's talked about standing with our Muslim brothers and sisters, in his words. Do you think President Trump needs to make such a gesture?
Absolutely. I mean, Ambassador Brown is doing what he needs to do, but he needs to understand President Donald J. Trump is the most powerful man in the world right now. He's in a position, President of the United States. He, from the Oval Office, from that power position, can be able to send a signal very loud and clear. And we've done this in the past against foreign terrorism. We need to do it on domestic terrorism against white supremacy that is growing every single day, that we stay silent. Not myself, but the leadership, the administration. When they continue to stay silent, it's going to increase. I remember Oak Creek. I remember hearing about the Pittsburgh Synagogue very shortly. I mean, these are constant from the Black church in Charleston. It will not stop until we send a loud signal and put the resources together to combat it and to stop it, because it is probably the most dangerous element of terrorism and that's making us less safe in our country than what we might think about what's happening outside of the lines of our country. We need to be focused on what's happening from within.
You also said in a statement after the attack that you were angry at, quote, those who follow the white supremacy agenda in my own country that sends a signal across the world that massacres like this is some kind of call to action. Who are you specifically talking about?
The ones that stay silent and the ones that support the Muslim ban. Not only once, but twice, 3 times did we in this nation say to the world and to everyone in this country that Muslims don't belong here. From the fact that every time we talk about a wall, it's not about a structure, but about xenophobia. It's about racism. It is a symbol in so many ways of targeting brown and black people in our country. The fact that we continue to stay silent is what's going to make us as a country less safe. And I can tell you, it's not just brown, black people speaking up. It is also white Americans across this country that are very distressed and also feel less safe because we're not speaking up against white nationalism.
President Trump said he didn't really see white supremacists as a rising threat around the world when asked in the Oval Office on Friday, and said he called them a quote, small group of people that have very, very serious problems, unquote. What did you make of that?
Well, I think he needs to pick up the phone and call the Department of Justice. There is real data and information currently right now of the rise of white supremacy right here in this United States of America. He needs to look at the data and the information and the facts and actually listen and understand the tremendous responsibility he has in being our president, our leader of our country. He cannot just say it's a small group of people. There's too many deaths, not only from the synagogue to the black churches to the temples to now the mosques. We need to be speaking up against this, and it has to start with him reiterating the importance of real information and data that says it's on rise. You can't just say it isn't when the facts say the complete opposite. He needs to do better by us in the country. He needs to speak up and condemn this very loud and very clearly.
Chelsea Clinton was confronted by an NYU student at a vigil for those killed in New Zealand this weekend over the way that Chelsea Clinton, had condemned recent comments from Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. Take a listen to this confrontation.
After all that you have done and all this Islamophobia that you have sowed. I'm so sorry. Well, certainly it was never my intention. This right here is the result of a massacre stoked by people like you and the words that you have put out into the world. And I want you to know that, and I want you to feel that deep inside. 49 people died because of the rhetoric that you put out there.
I don't know if you could hear that. It's a video that's gone pretty viral. But basically, this NYU student is saying that because Chelsea Clinton confronted Ilhan Omar, Congresswoman Omar, in the way she did, that the massacre is partly her fault. I don't know if you saw it, but I'm wondering what your response is.
Well, I know, Congresswoman Omar and myself have gotten so many death threats. I think she is probably, really, I actually pray every day for her safety. I can just tell you the kind of public disagreement and the kind of language that sometimes is being used towards disagreeing with her on a number of fronts, foreign policy issues. People need to be very careful. She's become very much a target. And right after not only the West Virginia, poster, putting her face there with the 9/11 towers in the background, this is a woman that is a mother, that is an American, that is serving her country. And we need to be very careful when we disagree publicly. When we disagree publicly on various policy agreements, we have to be very careful in the language that we use. And I can tell you, look, I have seen the letters and have seen the various posts from not only from Republicans, but also Democrats, that when we target or disagree, we need to be very careful in that it's not feeding into the Islamophobia that is growing in our country.
It's interesting that you raise that because before the attack in New Zealand, you had said something about Islamophobia in relation to Congresswoman Omar and her comments about Israel supporters that I want to ask you about. You were asked why Democrats responded so strongly to her comments about supporters of Israel, and this is what you said.
This past week, I feel, and I know this would be somewhat shocking for some, but I think Islamophobia is very much among the Democratic Party as well as the Republican Party.
Obviously, we condemn all Islamophobia. I'm sure you and I would agree on that 100%. And the poster of Congresswoman Omar, the death threats against her, all of that is reprehensible. But are you suggesting, just help me understand here, are you suggesting that Democrats who took issue with Congresswoman Omar's comments did so because of anti-Muslim bias?
I mean, I think that's part of it. But let me tell you why. I've been there only for a short period of time, and there are members on the other side of the aisle that have been very, very using various tropes and regarding against my Jewish brothers and sisters, using different kinds of. I mean, they've so-called tweets and different kinds of rhetoric that they support, and many of those are the same people that support this president, who doesn't want to condemn white supremacy in our country and white nationalism that is growing. And I want to say, this is what I saw is this double standard. Is it because she's a black Muslima? Is it because it's around the issue of human rights violations from the country of Israel? I don't know, but I can tell you if it was really about anti-Semitism and condemning that, then we need to be able to say to all the members, and that's what we ended up at the end, condemning all forms of hate, but also holding every single person accountable to the same standard. And that's what I didn't see. And that's when I think to myself and pause, as a person that ran a racial justice campaign for years, who grew up in the most beautiful, blackest city in the country, in the city of Detroit. I mean, I pause and think to myself, is it because she's a black American and she's Muslim? And so that's where I pause and say to myself, is there an issue here? And I guess our mere presence there, the fact that now there's not only one, but now 3 Muslim Americans serving in Congress, that our mere presence is going to be able to possibly break down any of these kinds of racialized, opinions, this kind of Islamophobia that I do feel like is still very present on both sides of the aisle. And I think my colleagues are not seeing that as an attack, as a saying that we just have a lot of work to do.
But you don't think that those Democrats, including Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, who viewed Congresswoman Omar's comments as anti-Semitic, you don't think that they legitimately felt that way? You think that there's anti-Muslim bigotry that's part of their criticism of Congresswoman Omar?
I think she becomes an easier target, is what I'm trying to say. I don't understand why some others can say similar, probably things that could be said to be anti-Semitic, that are not being held to the same standard. That's what I'm saying. And I can tell you, I've been there long enough to see that there are some issues there, again, on the other side of the aisle that continue to be held, they're being held unaccountable. And so I just want to be able to say, like, when we uplift and uplift like people like Ilhan and others and saying we need more people like us to run for office, I realize, again, our mere presence being there, understanding that for many, they have never met a Muslim before, but also probably the fact that we are women of color that is very vocal against human rights violations, especially in the country of Israel or even Saudi Arabia, that we are coming from a place of personal experiences as being people of color, with my living grandmother in the West Bank and the occupied territories, that we want to be heard and we want to be seen beyond whatever these kinds of labels that people like to put on us. And I think we just become an easier target for folks. And that's what worries me, is that I don't understand why others can say something probably is worse and probably stemmed on white supremacy, can get away with it. But then Ilhan, who's really coming from a place of disagreeing with the policies of the country of Israel, where my grandmother lives currently right now with inequality, is not treated with any human dignity. That if she speaks up, then it's seen. And again, I feel like because she's Muslim and because she's black, she's an easier target for them to attack and target. And again, I am saying this from my experience being a member of Congress, that it is somehow embedded, I believe, in her being someone that was easier to make so-called an example of.
All right, I have a lot more questions for you, but we're out of time. So Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, I hope you will come back on this show or my daily show, The Lead, to talk more about all sorts of issues, including impeachment and Middle East policy. And please, again, I would just like to say our sympathies to you and to the entire Muslim community in the United States and around the world. Thanks again for being here.
Thank you.
To help victims of these awful attacks, you can go to CNN.com/impact to impact your world. President Trump punted when asked about the rise of white nationalism. How are the Democratic presidential candidates responding? Up next, we'll go to Iowa, where presidential candidate Amy Klobuchar joins us live from the campaign trail. Stay with us.
why families keep coming back to the Keys. Generation after generation. Keep the tradition alive in the Florida Keys and Key West.
Everyone's got to listen to Mom. When it comes to reducing the sugar in your family's diet, Coke, Dr. Pepper, and Pepsi hear you, and we're working together to do just that, bringing you more great-tasting beverages with less sugar or no sugar at all, smaller portion sizes, clear calorie labels, and reminders to think balance. Because we know Mom wants what's best. More beverage choices, smaller portions, less sugar. BalanceUS.org.
Have you ever wondered how ancient humans survived pandemics? How early sailors navigated using the sky? Or why the hottest stars are blue in color? Now, there's an easy way to discover interesting people, places, and ideas in every category imaginable. The Great Courses Plus, where your access to thousands of topics is unlimited, and keen insight is provided by the world's leading professors and experts. Start your free trial offer now.
We didn't dream up a new way to find the best ramen. We never thought, you know what Mars needs? A dune buggy. We didn't decide you should be able to share your home with travelers from around the world. We're not the ones who imagined one day we'd all be streaming movies, or whatever she's about to do. But when asked if these ideas were possible, we're the only cloud with the capabilities, experience, and know-how to make them happen. AWS is how.
The big drug companies don't see us as people. They see us as profits. We're paying the highest prescription drug prices in the world so they can make billions? Americans shouldn't have to choose between buying medication and buying food for our families. It's time for someone to look out for us. Congress, stop the greed. Cut drug prices now.
I love playing sports, but I'm done with dating games. That's why I'm on eHarmony.
At eHarmony, we connect you on what really matters. That's why every 14 minutes, someone finds love on eHarmony. Start free today.
BDO says the approval process is similar throughout Latin America.
We'll need first-hand experience in each country.
And BDO can find these people.
BDO has these people.
People who know BDO.
When you have nausea, heartburn, indigestion, upset stomach, diarrhea.
Girl, Pepto Ultra Coating will treat your stomach right.
Nausea, heartburn, indigestion, upset stomach, diarrhea.
Try Pepto with Ultra Coating.
Looking to lose weight this year?
Try FDA-approved Ally.
For every 5 pounds you lose,
Ally can help you lose 2 to 3 more by preventing about 25% of the fat you eat from being absorbed. For the only FDA-approved OTC weight loss aid, try Ally.
Closed captioning brought to you by Mesobook.com.
We offer a free book on mesothelioma. Call for the free book and receive so much more. Call 1-800-831-3700.
Welcome back to State of the Union. I'm Jake Tapper. After Friday's horrific terrorist attack in New Zealand, Democratic presidential candidates are offering their condolences and reaching out to the Muslim community and highlighting a contrast between their responses to the international tragedy and President Trump's. Democratic presidential candidate and Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar joins me now live from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Congresswoman, thanks for joining us. Let's start on that terrorist attack in New Zealand. Your fellow Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal suggested on Friday, quote, "I think the public discourse from the president on down is a factor in some of these actions." Do you agree?
I don't think you can actually take each of the murderous acts and say what role Donald Trump played, but I can tell you this. His rhetoric doesn't help, and many of these people, whether it was the person who tried to bomb Barack Obama or this murderer in New Zealand, have cited Donald Trump along the way. So to me, that means, at the very least, he is dividing people. They are using him as an excuse, and he, at the very least, should be giving strong statements, public speeches, defending Muslims in this world. Because I can tell you, having the biggest Somali population in the United States of America, I know they get hit all the time. And one of our jobs as a leader is to stand up, whether people are Jewish, whether they're Muslim, no matter how they worship, no matter what they look like. We have to remember that they are all part of a country of shared dreams, and that's the United States of America. So making that point as the leader of the most famous democracy in the world, you have to make that point all the time, and he has not been doing that.
President Trump said after the attack that he did not see a rise in white nationalism around the world. He called it just a small group of people. Data from the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe shows reports of hate crimes are up in many countries worldwide. The ADL says that the rise of white nationalism, white separatism in the United States is also happening here in the U.S. What would you do as president to fight this?
We have to make a major effort to figure out what's going on with these groups. There has been an increase in hate crimes. There has been an increase in very negative rhetoric at groups. And it, like the Congresswoman said, no matter how someone looks, it happens to them. They could be Orthodox Jews, it happens to them. They could be Hispanics, it's been happening to them. There was a little girl that went out to dinner with her parents in Minnesota, and these guys walk by, Muslim family, guy walks by and says, "You four go home. You go home to where you came from." And little girl looks up at her mom, this is in Minnesota, and says, "Mom, I don't want to eat dinner at home. You said we could eat out tonight." Jake, you think of the innocent words of that little girl. She only knows one home, and that's my state. She only knows one home, and that's the United States of America. So in addition to the murderous acts that we just saw in New Zealand and that we've seen all across the country, every single day there's these acts, these daggers, for people that are just trying to live their lives and trying to make it in our country. So I think it's on all of us to condemn this hate. Our faith groups in my state have come together, the Muslim groups and the Jewish groups and our Christian groups have come together, and with signs everywhere that say when it's Ramadan, happy Ramadan, and teaching people in the Catholic faith what the Quran's about. We have tried to share that, and that's part of it, but it is also what you do when a crisis happens. People are watching, and he does not meet that standard.
The shooter broadcast the attack for 17 minutes on Facebook Live, and now social media companies such as Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, they're under fire for failing to halt the spread of that gruesome video, even hours later in some cases. Should any punitive action be taken against those companies, do you think?
Those companies for so long have said, we have your back. Meanwhile, your data is getting shared. You send an email to someone, and the next thing you see an advertisement about the thing you sent the email on. So that's why, one, privacy legislation to basically say, hey, we have a right over our data, stop messing around with us, and then also put in plain language what your rights are instead of 50 pages, and then finally notify us when there's breaches. And when it comes to hateful violence like this, they should have to get this off the internet immediately. There's no place on the internet for people watching murders.
So let's talk about your record, if we can. From 1999 to 2007, you were the top prosecutor for the county that surrounds Minneapolis, Hennepin County. A study from around that time, from during your time heading that office by one of your predecessors, then with the Council on Crime and Justice, found wide racial disparities in the justice system at the time you took office. It preceded you, but they issued this report during your time there. Minnesota Public Radio wrote, quote, "The ratio of blacks sent to Minnesota prisons compared to whites is the highest in the country. People who are black account for 70% of Hennepin County's drug cases. If convicted, they are sentenced to time behind bars at 3 times the rate of whites guilty of the same offense." Now, that was data from the start of your term. When you were the county attorney, did you do anything to try to improve these broad, stark racial disparities? And if so, what did you do?
Of course I did, Jake. In fact, if you look at the data, you'll see there was a 65% decrease in incarceration of African Americans when you go from the beginning of my term to the end. And we worked very hard on several fronts. The first is to diversify the office and to add more people of color to the ranks of prosecutors, and I did that. The second was to look at how we were handling drug court and make sure that we were doing it in a way that wasn't racist. And you can always do better. I can tell you, you learn in retrospect when you look back things you can do better. The third thing was to up our focus on white-collar crimes. Things that are committed in the boardrooms are just as bad as things that are committed with a crowbar if someone's trying to break in a house. And so I really made a major effort on that. And then finally, I was one of the first prosecutors in the country to work with the Innocence Project to do a DNA review on our cases, to do something differently when it came to eyewitness identification. So you'd have the police officer who was not involved in investigating the crime show the photos, and you would show the photos one at a time instead of all at once. And then finally, we had videotaped interrogations in Minnesota. We were one of the only states that did it at the time to make sure that suspects were treated fairly, Miranda rights were being read, and we actually I ended up, I remember debating the Queen's DA about that to defend that practice, to protect individual rights. So I made this a major effort because I truly believe that our mission is to convict the guilty, yes, but protect the innocents. And there has been racism in our system, and there still is.
According to the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, in 2004, you attributed falling crime numbers in Hennepin County largely to aggressive police attacks on drug traffic. In light of what we know about how, in general, crackdowns on drug crime exacerbate these racial disparities in the criminal justice system, you said, on this issue of drugs, you said there are always things you could do better in retrospect. What do you wish you had done better in retrospect?
Well, that's a great question. I think one of the things that we are starting to resolve is the federal drug sentences. And I was a sponsor of the First Step Act, a co-sponsor, and that was the important law that just passed on a bipartisan basis that brought down the federal drug sentences, which were much higher than the local drug sentences for nonviolent offenders. It's called the First Step Act because there has to be a Second Step Act, and that gets at what you're talking about, which is nonviolent offender drug sentences in localities all over the country. 90% of those nonviolent drug offenders are in prison, not in the federal system. So that's got to be the next step, is that in Washington, we create incentives for all of the local DA's offices across the country to reduce their drug sentences.
But that's what you're looking for.
And I believe...
What do you wish you had done differently at the time, though? I understand you're talking about what you want to do in the future.
Well, I would have looked at those drug sentences and seen what we could have done differently at that time. That's one thing. We had as I said, we had to diversify the office. I did that. I looked at our sentences as much as every single case. Now, we had a huge office, over 400 employees, but I would try to make sure we were fair regardless of race. And I actually close to the people that ran the study that you talked about from the beginning of my term. And I had met with them and talked to them about that back then, and I knew the changes that we needed to make. Felony DWI, drunk drivers, a lot of those perpetrators.
In Delaware. Take a listen.
I have the most progressive record of anybody running for the United States, if anybody who would run. I didn't mean... But anybody who would run.
So putting the slip up aside about would run versus running, and he's obviously going to run, is that true? Does Vice President Biden have the most progressive record of anyone running?
He has been running things for a long time as a senator and then as vice president. I'm sure he will be able to point to some major accomplishments that are progressive, and then he'll have to explain things that weren't as progressive. I think every candidate is going to do that. You just asked me about my record as a prosecutor, and I am happy to talk about that. And I'm also happy to talk about things that we have done to address racism when I got to the Senate, as well as things that I'm going to continue to do. So I think every candidate is going to have to look back at their positions in the past and look forward to what they want to do as president. But I think what's most important is that we put someone forward that, one, is going to have the backs of people, two, understands the issues here from bringing down the prices of pharmaceutical drugs, and three, is able to get it done. And that's what I bring to this table, Jake. I'm someone was just ranked by Vanderbilt as getting the most done for any Democratic senator on 15 different metrics. And that's because I've been able to find common ground, to get bills passed and to respond to my constituents. And I think that's what we need in the White House.
Lastly, Senator, the U.S. ambassador to New Zealand, Scott Brown, just told me that he has not spoken to President Trump in the wake of the terror attacks, but the president has found time in the last few days to attack the late Senator John McCain on Twitter twice in just the last day or so, personally attacking him by saying that McCain was last in his class at Annapolis, talking about, quote, stains against John McCain's record. I know you and Senator McCain were close. He's obviously not with us anymore, so he can't defend himself. What's your reaction?
This is just another outrageous action by the president. John McCain was a war hero. He served our country well, and he died. And the courage he showed in life was matched when he was in that cell for 5 years in Vietnam as a prisoner of war, was matched by the courage he showed us when he died. And the fact that the president would be now attacking John McCain for things like turning over a report to the FBI, which was, of course, the right thing to do, for things like serving our country. I cannot even express. I think back to when I saw John McCain the last time in his ranch. My husband and I went there to see him and Cindy, and the words he pointed to me are the words that Donald Trump should remember. And those are words from his book, where he said, because he couldn't speak very well, there is nothing more liberating than fighting for a cause larger than yourself. That's because John believed in America. And John believed, as I believe, that when a tragedy happens like in New Zealand, you do all you can to reach out to that country, and you do all you can to stand up for this simple belief that people are different in our country, but we are all part of a greater America. And the president chose to take the different road. That's not what they want to hear here in Iowa. I spent all day here yesterday, and I can tell you they didn't like how we reacted to that horrible murder. And I'm going to see them again today at the parade in Cedar Rapids and in cafes all over this state. And they are decent people that expect a president to behave decently when things go wrong.
Senator Amy Klobuchar from the great state of Minnesota, thanks so much for joining us today. Have fun in Iowa today.
Thank you. Happy St. Patrick's Day, Jay.
Thank you. Beto O'Rourke is already facing some backlash over his campaign rollout. Why is he apologizing? That's next.
All right, sir, let's begin. And that should do it.
What about the shoulders?
What about them?
The inseam.
We're finished, sir.
What?
Trust me, our suits fit.
What if tailors were like most financial advisors?
Sort of.
Creative planning is different. We look at your entire financial picture to create a comprehensive plan tailored just for you. Call 866-CREATIVE to learn more.
They're America's biopharmaceutical researchers, pursuing life-changing cures in a country that fosters innovation. Here, they find breakthroughs, like a way to fight cancer by arming a patient's own T-cells. Because it's not just about the next breakthrough, it's all the ones after that.
Hey, renovators. Time to dream bigger. Wayfair, you're my new secret weapon. You got what I need for my renovation. I love all these options, so much to choose from. Bedrooms and basements, even my kitchen, your service is sweet. And my job is complete. Wayfair, here I come. Start your renovation at wayfair.com.
I'm missing out on our family outings because I can't find a bladder leakage product that fits. Everything was too loose. But Depend Fit Flex feels tailored to me.
With a range of sizes for all body types, Depend Fit Flex underwear is guaranteed to be your best fit.
George has heart failure and a busy day ahead. George has Entresto, a heart failure pill that helps keep people alive and out of the hospital. Don't take Entresto if pregnant. It can cause harm or death to an unborn baby. Don't take Entresto with an ACE inhibitor or aliskiren, or if you've had angioedema with an ACE or ARB. The most serious side effects are angioedema, low blood pressure, kidney problems, or high blood potassium. Ask your doctor about Entresto.
That was great. Let's be honest. Dealing with your insurance shouldn't be more frustrating than the accident itself. That's why Esurance makes it simple. Just take some pics, go to sleep, Wake up,
Grab a bite.
maybe some racquetball,
And boom, your money's on the way.
so you can get back on the road fast. Well, not that fast. The editor had to make it fit in 30 seconds.
It was pretty tricky, actually.
And tagline. When insurance is simple, it's surprisingly painless.
People have begun to just sort of gather outside the White House, to stand near the gate there on Pennsylvania Avenue and across the street. This applause you hear, what has happened is that a moving van has just pulled up over at the White House.
These folks, they don't have time to go to the post office. They have businesses to grow, customers to care for, lives to get home to. They use Stamps.com. Print discounted postage for any letter, any package, anytime, right from your computer. All the amazing services of the post office, only cheaper. Get our special TV offer, a 4-week trial plus postage and a digital scale. Go to Stamps.com/try and never go to the post office again.
Hiring was always a huge challenge. Endless hours on job sites with not a lot to show for it. Then I found ZipRecruiter. They figured out hiring. I post my job, they put it all over the web, and they send me the right people because their technology is smart. ZipRecruiter often sends me the right person in 24 hours.
ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. Try it for free today at ZipRecruiter.com/fast.
The Bush Years. Tonight at 10 on CNN.
Our silence is complicity. With these words, the President of the United States assigned a moral equivalence between those spreading hate and those with the courage to stand against it. And in that moment, I knew that the threat to this nation was unlike any I had seen in my lifetime.
Former Vice President Joe Biden describing his reaction to the president equivocating on white nationalism after Charlottesville, as the president again downplays the threat of white supremacy after the terror attack in New Zealand. Let's discuss. I want to start with you, Waleed. You've been very critical of the president since the attack. What's your reaction to him again saying he doesn't think that white supremacy, white nationalism is a growing threat? It's just a few disturbed individuals.
Well, I thought Senator Klobuchar's response was a little disappointing. I actually appreciate Joe Biden's strong words here that, the president doesn't feel like he needs to condemn white nationalism or sympathize with Muslims right now because he's sympathetic to white nationalism. I mean, this is a president and a politician who, peddled the birther conspiracy about President Obama, called for a complete and total shutdown of Muslims, said that he was open to closing down mosques in this country after the Paris attacks, has suggested that he's open to getting rid of Muslims in this country. I mean, if that's not white nationalism, then I don't know what is.
What do you think, Congressman?
Well, the president condemned white nationalism and the actions that happened in New Zealand. There's no question about it. None of us can be emphatic.
I don't think he specifically mentioned white nationalism. He condemned the attacks.
Yes. None of us can be emphatic enough, though, in our condemnation of hate in all of its forms. And that's why we have to step back and take a minute and talk about what we can do about it. And I'll give you an example. When white nationalism reared its ugly head in the House of Representatives, the Republican leader, Kevin McCarthy, stripped Steve King of his committee assignments. Today, as we sit here, Representative Omar still sits on the Foreign Affairs Committee after her anti-Semitic comments because Democrats and Nancy Pelosi refused to do anything about it.
That's a very shameful comparison to make, Congressman. I'm disappointed you would use this moment to do that. Couple of things. Steve King has for years made all sorts of horrendous comments that have gone without, with just a deafening silence from your party. And I actually think this is a moment to lift this up. I mean, you are correct, Jake. The president did not specifically call out white nationalism, and the way that we have to combat hate and sexism and bigotry and anti-gay bias, you name it, we have to name it. We have to say it. We have to have that courage. And we cannot just resort to, Ilhan Omar, she apologized. And I think actually it ended up by, having a resolution to be against all forms of hate. My God, to see what then happened this week was the right thing to do.
Congresswoman Love?
This is years after Representative Omar actually made some comments, too. So, look, all I have to say is what is our responsibility in all of this? I get so tired of the blame game. It's because of somebody else that we're doing this. When do we take responsibility for our own actions? When I was in high school, I remember teaching a swimming class. And after 6 weeks of teaching this little boy, he looks at me and he says, I want you to know that my parents don't like you because you're brown. But I do. You're my favorite teacher. And what I realized in that moment is that racism is not in your DNA. It's taught. It's a seed. It's a nasty seed that grows and poisons the soil around it. And the only thing, Martin Luther King said this best, only darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. And I'm waiting for people to actually start talking about love language and get away from shedding some light. You cannot sit there and say, I'm going to spew out hateful language in reaction to another hateful language. You have to start standing up and saying, you know, what is my responsibility here in what we're doing for the American people? The American people are tired of it. We need a little bit of inspiration, a little bit of light, and a little bit of unity so that we can narrow this gap, this widening gap that we have in this country.
Briefly, I'd just say that's why, though, actually, I thought the ambassador was quite fantastic in the way he talked about Ambassador Brown this morning. That I would have liked to hear our president talk like that, not because I blame him, because we can go into all of the ways that he has, kind of played footsie with white nationalists. More importantly, when things happen, yes, you should talk about love. Yes, we should do everything we can to stand in solidarity and say, we love you, we're with you, you're Americans, we're all Americans. There's no identity politics. There's no, this is your issue or that issue. These are American issues that we have to deal with together.
But that's not happening in Congress right now. That's not what's happening. People are actually going out and they're trying to find these moments on social media that will go viral to make them popular instead of actually talking about the issues that will help solve this problem and heal Americans.
Congressman, I want to bring it back to something that Waleed said about what President Trump has said about Muslims. There was a story that he told on the campaign trail about General Blackjack Pershing. It's not a true story at all, but he continually told it about how he handled a group of captured Muslim terrorists, I think in the Philippines. Here's just a little excerpt from it.
He took the 50 terrorists and he took 50 men and he dipped 50 bullets in pig's blood. And he had his men load his rifles and he lined up the 50 people and they shot 49 of those people. And the 50th person, he said, you go back to your people and you tell them what happened.
So that is not a true story. And he continually shared it, and it was in the Philippines. But the president, I just think it's just as a factual matter, talks about Muslims in a way that you don't, talks about Muslims in a way that nobody at this table does. And he has continually done that. Don't you wish that he would talk about Muslims the way that Scott Brown does, the ambassador to New Zealand?
Well, likewise. Ambassador Brown was unequivocal in his condemnation of the hateful actions in New Zealand. And again, the president, what the president said yesterday, over the past 48 hours, condemned the actions of this crazy, hateful individual. And that none of us can do enough. None of us can be emphatic enough in doing that ourselves. That's what I've done. I'm sure that's what each of your panelists today and you have done as well.
Willie?
Look, for years after 9/11, we heard this call of moderate Muslims needing to condemn radical Islamic terror. But I don't think moderate Republicans are doing enough to hold President Trump accountable for his rhetoric. And at the same time, if you look at what's peddled on Fox News, on Breitbart, you have these billionaires like Rupert Murdoch and Robert Mercer. Anytime you read Breitbart or Fox News, it's just conspiracy theories about how Muslims, immigrants, people of color are to blame for this country's and the world's economic problems. And no one is standing up to any of these people. No one is standing up to Donald Trump. No one is standing up to Rupert Murdoch.
That is not true.
That's not true.
As a former member of Congress, that's exactly what I did. Anytime he talked about S-hole countries, I went after him when he talked about the ban
you came on
of
the
Muslim.
show and did so.
Yes, we talked about that. There are people that are actually doing that and calling people out. This is why it's so important to make sure that you hold everyone accountable to the principles that you believe in, Democrats and Republicans. And it's not, you can't follow a person blindly because they have an R behind their name. I would actually say that we've probably been Republicans longer than the president has. And I feel like it's important for us to hold him accountable to the principles and the platforms that we believe in. That's what's going to actually save the party. And I think help heal what's happening in the United States. But to say that there aren't people that are coming out and holding the president accountable is not true. We need more of that, but we need each of us holding all of us accountable.
I think Muslims just wake up every morning seeing this president degrade Muslims and feel like why is this man still president of the United States?
But I think it's, unfortunately, with this president, it's not just Muslims. As a black woman,
Right.
I can tell you, it ain't. I feel more unsafe than I ever have in my country, in my own country. So I think there is a lot of solidarity around how terrifying a feeling that is to know that you can't trust your own government. At the same time, I hope that in 2020, people take seriously that this is the kind of question we should be asking from the people running for president. What kind of moral leadership will you offer this country, as you put to your guests?
An important conversation, and one I wish we had more time for. Thank you all for being here. Really appreciate it. Beto O'Rourke says he's just born to be in it. Does that remind you of anyone? That's this week's State of the Cartoonian. Next, stay with us.
From five-star gourmet restaurants to laid-back fish shacks. From a meal with an epic view to an intimate culinary affair. If you can't find something great to eat in the Florida Keys, you can always order online. The Florida Keys and Key West.
I'm feeling good.
Make the most of your business card with Vistaprint.
I'm feeling good.
500 standard cards start at just $9.99 with code BC Now.
I'm feeling good.
Own the now with Vistaprint.
You wouldn't accept an incomplete job from anyone else. Why accept it from your allergy pills? Most pills don't finish the job because they don't relieve nasal congestion. Flonase Sensimist is different. It relieves all your worst symptoms, including nasal congestion, which most pills don't. It's more complete allergy relief, and all from a gentle mist you can barely feel. Flonase Sensimist helps block 6 key inflammatory substances. Most pills only block 1, and 6 is greater than 1. Flonase Sensimist.
Welcome back. Beto O'Rourke has finally decided he's all in for 2020. Will this presidential bid give him the meaning he's been looking for? That's the subject of this week's State of the Cartoonian. Beto O'Rourke launched his presidential campaign with a big splashy cover of Vanity Fair magazine, followed by gesticulation-filled appearances in Iowa venues.
I see the future of America right here, right now.
Earning the notice of the president.
I think he's got a lot of hand movement. I've never seen so much hand movement. I said, is he crazy or is that just the way he acts?
O'Rourke is ready for the fight. He told Vanity Fair, "Man, I'm just born to be in it." And he's already framing the battle against Trump as, quote, every epic movie that you've ever seen from Star Wars.
I won't fail you. I'm not afraid.
To the Lord of the Rings.
He wants the precious, but we mustn't let him have it.
Adding, quote, this is the moment where we're going to win or lose everything. Running for president is the culmination of O'Rourke's lifelong journey to find himself. As you see in his various posts on Medium, he sees himself as a kind of political Jack Kerouac, going on the road, again, looking for his voters.
The only people for me are the mad ones. The ones who are mad to live, mad to talk, mad to be saved.
But before our political Kerouac can get to Donald Trump, he might face another obstacle or two.
As they say where I come from, get a life.
A new CNN series explores Richard Nixon's rise and his political destruction.
I don't give a goddamn what the story is.
Richard M. Nixon has lied repeatedly.
No reporter from the Washington Post should ever be in the White House again. You understand?
The tougher it gets, the cooler I get. I have what it takes.
Impeach Nixon now! Impeach Nixon now!
I want to say this to the television audience, because people have got to know whether or not their president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook.
This crap about Watergate.
Let others wallow in Watergate. We're going to do our job.
I'm going to kick their ass.
Nobody's going to package me. Nobody's going to make me put on an act for television. I'm not going to engage in any gimmicks or any stunts, wear any silly hats. If people looking at me say that's a new Nixon, then all that I can say is, well, maybe you didn't know the old Nixon.
Tricky Dick, a new CNN original series, tonight at 9.
This is GPS, the Global Public Square. Welcome to all of you in the United States and around the world. I'm Fareed Zakaria coming to you live from New York. Today on the show, the mosque massacre in Christchurch. The Prime Minister called it one of New Zealand's darkest days. We'll bring you the latest. And Brexit breakdown. What's next on Theresa May's quest to pull Britain out of Europe? Also, Ukraine will elect a new president 2 weeks from today. Russia has been trying new ways to cyber meddle in the elections. Might this be Putin's test drive for the 2020 American polls? I'll ask the man who heads up Google's sister company that monitors and counters cyber attacks. Then, the 2008 Mumbai attacks, a city invaded by terrorists who killed scores of people, but also a city that fought back. These stories in a new film, Hotel Mumbai. I'll talk to the star, Dev Patel. But first, here's my take. One of the great strengths of democracy is that bad policies are often reversed. That's a consolation when we look at the flurry of pandering programs being enacted as the populist wave works its way through the Western world. When a new government is elected, much of this can be undone, except for Brexit, which, if it goes through, might prove to be the most profound and lasting legacy of this decade. Britain, famous for its prudence, propriety, and punctuality, is suddenly looking like a banana republic as it makes reckless decisions, misrepresents reality, and now wants to change its own self-imposed deadline. As Martin Sandbu writes in the Political Quarterly, Brexit has always been a solution in search of a problem. To me, the best evidence of this is that Britain's Eurosceptics generally want to leave the EU because they see it as a statist juggernaut. But in virtually every other member country, Eurosceptics see the EU as a free market juggernaut. That's why they don't like it. So either all those other countries, 27 countries, have it backwards, or Britain's Conservative Party has gone nuts. When I asked Anne Applebaum last week how historians would understand the road to Brexit, she suggested that it all centers around the Conservative Party. The Tories could probably claim to be the most significant political party of the 20th century, governing Britain for most of that period, producing Churchill, Thatcher, and other iconic Western statesmen. But after the Cold War, as left-wing parties abandoned socialist ideas and moved to the center, the right faced an identity crisis. In America, this mobilized the Republicans to emphasize social and cultural issues like abortion, gay rights, and immigration. In Britain, Tories found themselves in the same mushy middle that Prime Ministers Tony Blair and David Cameron inhabited. So, as Applebaum noted, they went radical on Europe. We're all weary of the drama.
Of the country, no! No! Division! Clear the lobby!
But keep in mind, Brexit will be a disaster. As Sandbu points out, Britain's economy is competitive and productive only in high-value manufacturing and in services, both of which depend on a deeply integrated market within Europe. The foreign policy impact of Brexit might prove to be even more consequential. Within a few years, Scotland and Northern Ireland will probably loosen their ties to Britain in order to maintain their association with Europe. The United Kingdom will then be reduced to just England and tiny Wales. London, a city that has shaped global affairs for 250 years, will become the West's Dubai, a place where lots of money sloshes around, but of no great geopolitical consequence. Europe will also lose a lot with Brexit. Britain is a big, vibrant economy. It's been a crucial voice in the community for free markets, openness, efficiency, and an outward-looking foreign policy. It has a powerful army that it deploys. As non-Western countries like China rise, the central question of international relations is, can the international system built by the West that has produced peace and prosperity for 75 years last? Or will the rise of China and India and the revival of Russia erode it and return us to what Robert Kagan calls the jungle of international life, marked by nationalism, protectionism, and war? The world order, as we know it, was built over 2 centuries during the reigns of 2 liberal Anglo superpowers, Britain and the United States. Brexit will mark the end of Britain's role as a great power. And I wonder whether it will also mark the day that the West, as a political and strategic entity, began to crumble. For more, go to cnn.com/Fareed and read my Washington Post column this week. And let's get started. We will get back to Brexit in a bit, but first, the massacre in Christchurch, New Zealand. The death toll is now up to 50. To put the number in perspective, more people were killed in 1 hour on Friday in 2 mosques in Christchurch than were killed in all of New Zealand in 2017. New Zealand's Prime Minister has vowed to change her country's gun laws, and her cabinet is meeting tomorrow to start those discussions. Joining me now to discuss are David Miliband, the President and CEO of the International Rescue Committee. He was the UK's Foreign Secretary from 2007 to 2010. Anne-Marie Slaughter, the CEO of the think tank New America. She was a top official in Hillary Clinton's State Department. And Ian Bremmer is the founder and president of the Eurasia Group, a global risk consultancy. Let me start with, the big picture on New Zealand. And Donald Trump was trying to suggest something, which I want to ask you, Ian, whether it's true, which is this is not a big deal in the sense that it is not a global phenomenon. I think that, again, he was implying it's not like Islamic terrorism, which is, is a widespread phenomenon with many centers, states that have promoted it over the years. These are one-off events. And while they're terrible and tragic, it's not, I think that's what Trump was trying to get at. Is that a fair point?
It's not a fair point. If you look at the United States itself, in the last 10 years, if you want to look at all of the extremist violence in the U.S., 70% of those attacks have been carried out by white supremacists on the right. There is still, of course, a danger of Islamic terrorism in the United States. Globally, the numbers are much more tilted towards Islamic terrorism. Most of that violence, a staggering, overwhelming number, is about Muslim terrorists on other Muslims.
Right. Within Syria, for example. Once you take those numbers, the numbers go way down.
Absolutely. And if the argument is that the United States has overspent and overhyped fear about extremist violence and terrorism as a whole post 9/11, the answer to that is certainly yes, in the context of what else we could be spending that money on. But I'm pretty sure that's not the message that President Trump was trying to put across to his supporters last week.
David Miliband, what does one do about this? So you have this, some segment of the white population that is enraged by immigration, by what they see as a, changing culture. How should politicians deal with it?
Look, the first thing is that the numbers that you cited at the beginning are shocking. But the most terrible thing about this week is that in some ways we shouldn't be shocked. We had the Finsbury Park attack on the mosque there. We had the attack on the Tree of Life synagogue in Pittsburgh. This is a global movement founded on hate, on the idea that Western societies are being, quote unquote, invaded by other people. And that says you've got to think both about defense. You've got to think about how do you make sure that you track these people, that you find them, that you ensure that gun laws are of the appropriate kind. But you've also got to play offense because their hateful ideology, what the Hope Not Hate, which is an organization in the UK dedicated to exposing what these essentially fascist organizations are up to, what they talk about is an ecosystem of far-right hate. And that takes offense as well, if you're going to break it up and make sure it doesn't become this kind of global movement. I just want to say this as well. I don't think people know that, to my knowledge, most of the effort of Western security services is now dedicated towards the danger of far-right extremism, more effort dedicated to far-right extremism and its potentially violent impact than it is to Islamic terrorism. And obviously, they feed off each other. And that's the other element of this that I think we have to watch.
The ecosystem of hate, as David says, have you been surprised by how many of these kind of groups there are in the United States, in Europe, and places like Australia and New Zealand?
No, because it's a movement. It's a white power movement. It is a terrorist movement that has a common both ideology and methodology, and it's very deliberately trying to fly under the radar by portraying people as lone wolves, as disturbed individuals, when actually they are in touch and they're also citing each other. I mean, the shooter in New Zealand cited the Norwegian shooting, cited Dylan Roof in Charleston, and at least in the United States, we simply have not paid enough attention to white extremist violence, white power. We pay much more attention on the left. But as Ian said, actually 70% of the attacks in the United States since 9/11 have been extremist violence on the right.
What do you make of the manifesto, Ian?
Well, I mean, we talked a little bit in the United States. Everyone said, oh, he's been inspired by Trump. 74 pages. There's one reference to President Trump where he says that he likes what he's doing in terms of supporting whites, but also strongly opposes policies. Overwhelmingly, through the entirety of the 74 pages, he's talking about Europe. This is a person who was radicalized much more inside Europe, inside France. He goes after Merkel. He says Merkel's enemy number one. He calls for the death of Erdogan. The level of identity politics, white on Muslim, if you see the average French, they think that 33% of France is Muslim, when in reality it's only 6 or 7%. The most popular nonfiction literature a few years ago was this submission by Michel Houellebecq, which was all about the Muslims taking over. If you really want to talk about where some of these ideas have been germinated, are exploding across the world, it's not here in the United States, even though we like to think it's all about us. It's actually in Europe. And that if you look at where his ideology has come from, where he's been motivated, inspired from, those are where the problems are.
We're going to have to come back to all this later, but when we come back, we're going to talk about Brexit and what the hell happens next.
Unpredictable Crohn's symptoms following you? For adults with moderately to severely active Crohn's disease, Stelara works differently. Studies showed relief and remission with dosing every 8 weeks.
Stelara may lower your ability to fight infections and may increase your risk of infections and cancer. Some serious infections require hospitalization. Before treatment, get tested for TB. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or flu-like symptoms or sores, have had cancer or developed new skin growths, or if anyone in your house needs or recently had a vaccine. Alert your doctor of new or worsening problems, including headaches, seizures, confusion, and vision problems. These may be signs of a rare, potentially fatal brain condition. Some serious allergic reactions and lung inflammation can occur.
Talk to your doctor today and learn how Janssen can help you explore cost support options. Remission can start with Stelara.
When cravings hit back. Choose Glucerna with slow-release carbs to help manage blood sugar and start making everyday progress. Glucerna.
Pardon the interruption, but this is big. Now at T-Mobile, get the Samsung Galaxy S10e included with unlimited data for just $40 a month.
Just because I'm head of sandwiches doesn't mean I spend all my time in the Arby's test kitchen. I spend a lot of my time out in the world, like in the waters of Alaska, where the seas are filled with fresh, flaky Alaskan pollock. Or the lively streets of New Orleans, where Cajun remoulade got its start. Or a bun factory. Arby's 2 for $5 crispy and Cajun fish sandwiches.
Arby's, we have the meat.
For sandwiches.
Humira patients, you inspire us. The way you triumph over adversity and live your lives. That's why we redesigned Humira. We wanted to make the experience better for you. Now there's less pain immediately following injection. We've reduced the size of the needle and removed the citrate buffers. And it has the same effectiveness you know and trust. Humira citrate-free is here. A little change can make a big difference.
Humira can lower your ability to fight infections. Serious and sometimes fatal infections, including tuberculosis and cancers, including lymphoma, have happened, as have blood, liver, and nervous system problems, serious allergic reactions, and new or worsening heart failure. Tell your doctor if you've been to areas where certain fungal infections are common, and if you've had TB, hepatitis B, are prone to infections, or have flu-like symptoms or sores. Don't start Humira if you have an infection.
Ask your doctor about Humira citrate-free. Here's to you.
Gary. I am proud of you, my man. Making simple, smart cashback choices. With Quicksilver from Capital One, you're earning unlimited 1.5% cash back on every purchase everywhere. Like on that new laptop. Quicksilver keeps things simple, Gary. And smart, like you. And I like that.
I guess I am pretty smart.
Don't let that go to your head, Gary. What's in your wallet?
Thanks for calling United Healthcare, Mrs. Murphy.
Hi, I need help getting an appointment with my podiatrist.
How's Wednesday at 2?
I can't. Dog agility.
Thursday at 10?
Sorry. 不痛不可.
Tuesday at 11?
Nope. Robot cage match.
How about the 28th at 3?
Done.
With United Healthcare Medicare Advantage plans, including the only plans with the AARP name, there's so much to take advantage of. From scheduling appointments to finding specialists, it's easier to get the care you need when you need it.
Closed captioning brought to you by Mesobook.com.
Mesothelioma, it's all we do. With 9 offices across the country, let us come meet with you. Call us at 1-800-213-8000.
It was an extraordinary week in British politics. For those keeping score at home, this week members of Parliament voted down Prime Minister May's second try at a Brexit deal, voted against the possibility of a second referendum, and voted to ask the EU to delay the date of Brexit. It's a bit of a rush on this one as the deadline is just 12 days away. We are back with Anne-Marie Slaughter, David Miliband, and Ian Bremmer. David, you're the Brit here. What is going to happen on Tuesday?
Fareed, first of all, you called my country a banana republic in your introduction, and that, I must say, that grieves me very, very deeply. This is not a laughing matter for all that you are enjoying this, because the truth is that the referendum that was held 3 years ago has driven a stake into the heart of parliamentary representative democracy. It's left MPs not knowing what their job is. Is it to use their judgment in the best interest of the country, or is it to follow a direction of the people that itself was completely unclear in its meaning? And so where we are now is a situation where, I mean, another distinguished commentator in the UK today called Britain a global joke, so you're not alone in this. Where we are today is that Mrs. May has said, if you don't follow me, then I'm afraid there's a gun on the table and you're going to have to blow your brains out. And I still think there's a chance, in fact, a better than even chance, that she will get her deal on Tuesday or conceivably even Wednesday.
And but that deal means
that,
what?
Right. That's exactly the right question. Because that deal means that Britain will leave, but it does not define the future relationship of Britain with the European Union. So all the arguments that are made against the second referendum, that it will divide the country, that it will prolong the agony, that it will fuel the far right, all those things are going to happen as Mrs. May's quote-unquote deal is shown only to be a quarter of the way towards the long-term relationship that Britain needs on economics, on security policy, and on the rest of it. So I'm afraid what Mrs. May's deal offers is more agony for Britain, and the parliamentary arithmetic, plus, I have to say, the real fear of the Labour leadership of going in for another referendum means that she's likely to get it, and that will only presage further real trouble for the UK economically. There's already been an economic cost, but also politically.
Anne-Marie, when you were in the State Department, you dealt with a lot with your European counterparts. How do you think the Europeans are looking at all this? And looking at Britain kind of go through a kind of national trauma/suicide?
Well, I think with amazement, it's watching the Britain essentially commit suicide as a power, as your column makes clear. On the other hand, they're also saying this is the cautionary tale. There are many Europeans that are saying this will actually strengthen the EU because we talk about a Grexit and a Frexit and every conceivable version of that. But looking at just how hard it is and what it's doing to business confidence actually means that it's strengthening the rest of the EU. On the other hand, it's a terrible thing because the EU will be weaker without Britain, and just watching a country self-destruct.
Ian, distinguished scholar of European politics, Anne-Marie's husband, Andy Muravchik, says and wrote this in the FT, look, at the end of the day, they're not going to leave. They can't leave. The economic logic is too compelling. And you will end up with a Norway-type situation where there is some association with Europe and they'll accept most of the European rules. Bizarrely, they won't have much of a vote, so it's a slightly worse deal for Britain, but life will go on. Is that the most likely outcome?
So the other side of David's call, where May might get her deal in the run-up to the final deadline, is that they decide that they can't get that because a longer extension is plausible that goes beyond the term limits of European parliamentary elections, a 9-month, a 12, even some say 21-month delay. And what we've seen from a lot of parliamentarians in the UK is, to the extent that you can delay the final day and avoid taking tough decisions that you personally don't want to be responsible for, just like in the US, you're willing to do that. Now, I think that's reasonably likely, but I would also say that most of the real pain of Brexit is already being experienced. The UK has already lost a lot of that credibility, a lot of its capacity to be a global and a European leader. A lot of the jobs have already gone away. The trajectory of the UK economy compared to the EU economies has already deteriorated. So as we get through not just these votes, but then the additional years of working out how that transition actually occurs, the other shoe that we're all waiting to drop will have slowly hit the ground.
David, why is the left not playing a role here of saying we demand a second referendum, we'll campaign on it, Britain's future is inexorably tied to Europe? I mean, what happened to the Labour Party of Tony Blair and David Miliband?
There are two reasons, really. The first reason is that some of the Labour leadership are themselves extremely sceptical about the European Union. Jeremy Corbyn voted against joining the European Union in 1975. There's a quote-unquote socialism in one country crowd who believe that the answer to the pressures of globalization is to put up the shutters and try to build your own fairer economy and society at home. That's one reason. The second is fear of the electoral consequences. 2/3 or 70% of Labour voters voted to stay in the European Union, but a significant number of Labour seats voted to leave the European Union. My former constituency had never elected anyone other than a Labour MP since 1832. No Tory had been elected since 1832. The only constituency in the country, but it voted 65% for leave. And among some Labour figures, there's a fear of the electoral consequences of being seen to deny the electorate what they voted for. That's why I spent 3 years as Foreign Minister arguing against a referendum between 2007 and 2010. Why? I quoted Clement Attlee and I quoted Mrs. Thatcher. Referendums are the refuge of dictators and demagogues. And in a parliamentary democracy, you risk a referendum, not just risking the result. You're risking actually a representative democratic process. And that's what Britain is struggling with today.
But now you think that the only way to undo the ill effects of the referendum is to have a second referendum.
Paradoxically, you can't stop the Brexit process simply by annulling it. It will take a doubling down. And I would say this, which I think is important. In Ireland, deep questions of national identity around abortion, around gay rights, have been resolved through referendums that have been very carefully curated with citizens' panels and really have involved a doubling down on democratic and popular engagement to try and mitigate that demagogic, dictatorial aspect of the referendum process.
Fascinating. We've got to stop. This is fascinating stuff, and we'll get back to it. Next on GPS, how did America go from having almost the top life expectancy in the world to among the worst among major developed nations today? Sanjay Gupta has a fascinating report on exactly that. He'll be with us when we come back.
You wouldn't accept an incomplete job from anyone else. Why accept it from your allergy pills? Most pills don't finish the job because they don't relieve nasal congestion. Flonase Sensimist is different. It relieves all your worst symptoms, including nasal congestion, which most pills don't. It's more complete allergy relief, and all from a gentle mist you can barely feel. Flonase Sensimist helps block 6 key inflammatory substances. Most pills only block 1, and 6 is greater than 1. Flonase Sensimist.
To be nobody but yourself in a world which is doing its best to make you everybody else means to fight the hardest battle which any human being can fight and never stop. Does this sound dismal? It isn't. It's the most wonderful life on earth.
I'm feeling good.
Make the most of your business card with Vistaprint.
I'm feeling good.
500 standard cards start at just $9.99 with code BC Now.
I'm feeling good.
Own the now with Vistaprint.
Your brain changes as you get older, but Prevagen helps your brain with an ingredient originally discovered in jellyfish. In clinical trials, Prevagen has been shown to improve short-term memory. Prevagen, healthier brain, better life.
It's probably going to be dinner and drinks.
Discover.
Hi, what's this Social Security alert?
It's a free alert if we find your Social Security number on the dark web.
Good, because I'm a little worried about my information getting out.
Oh, why's that?
My Social Security number is 875-6.
Okay, I see. Is that your daughter?
No, it's a macaw, and his name is Timothy.
Timmy, want a cracker?
Timmy, do you want a cracker?
What do you think, Kevin?
No.
Sign up online for free. Discover Social Security alerts.
Here's an unfortunate fact that applies to most financial advisors. They're not legally required to act in your best interest. Creative planning is different. Our certified financial planner practitioners are always fiduciaries, which means they're required by law to always act in your best interest. Call 866-CREATIVE or visit creativeplanning.com and experience the difference creative planning can make. Creative Planning. Wealth management redefined.
Others may hate you, but those who hate you don't win unless you hate them. And then you destroy yourself.
These folks, they don't have time to go to the post office. They have businesses to grow, customers to care for, lives to get home to. They use Stamps.com. Print discounted postage for any letter, any package, anytime, right from your computer. All the amazing services of the post office, only cheaper. Get our special TV offer, a 4-week trial plus postage and a digital scale. Go to Stamps.com/try and never go to the post office again.
Smart News.
I was only watching news I agreed with.
I was only getting news from social media.
Now, I use Smart News.
We both love Smart News.
I can read about politics, business, sports.
And I can read about local news, celebrities, and more.
We trust Smart News. It has news that matters.
And we still get the stories we want.
And she's definitely become more open-minded. Join over 15 million readers.
And download Smart News for free today.
The Bush Years. Tonight at 10 on CNN.
And now for our What in the World segment. One of the experts in Dr. Sanjay Gupta's new HBO documentary tell him that health gives us a measure of how we're doing as a society. If that's the case, American society is in trouble. Take just 2 statistics. Life expectancy has been on the decline in America for the last 3 years. That hasn't happened in 100 years, the documentary points out. And then there's this. In the 1960s, the film says, Americans had among the highest life expectancy in the world. Now it ranks toward the bottom of the list of major developed countries. Sanjay is, of course, CNN's chief medical correspondent, as well as a practicing brain surgeon. And he's diagnosed the heart of the problem in a new film called One Nation Under Stress. It premieres 9 p.m. Eastern on HBO, March 25th. Sanjay, you point out that the decline in American numbers comes very specifically from a particular segment. It's not blacks, where the mortality rates are actually declining. It's not Hispanics. It is just whites, mostly, I think, between 45 and 54, mostly with a high school but not a college education. And you say that what that tells us is that this medical problem is caused by essentially inequality and dashed expectations.
Yeah, I mean, that's really it. I mean, when you look at these numbers you just quoted, Fareed, it's worth pointing out, first of all, look at other wealthy nations around the world that may have gone through some of the challenges, ups and downs of the economy and the labor force over the last several years. They don't have the same problems. Their mortality rates continue to go down in a good direction. Life expectancy goes up. So what is specific to the United States, what is specific to whites, and what is specific to the white working class, as you said, Fareed? Well, this idea that these are the sons and daughters of the greatest generation, I mean, the idea was that they were supposed to inherit the earth, or certainly inherit the United States, at least at a minimum. That did not happen. Automation, outsourcing, jobs left, wages went down, and now they find themselves dying at a faster rate, Fareed, than any other cohort in the world. And again, compared to developed nations, compared to other populations within the United States, the white working class in particular, it continues to decrease in life expectancy.
And this idea of dashed expectations causes a psychological trauma that is actually well documented. There's this amazing monkey study that you show in the documentary. Tell us about that.
Yeah, we really wanted to approach this from a sociological angle, but also a developmental biology angle. So in this particular experiment, you get two monkeys, Capuchin monkeys. They're doing a task, and they get a reward, which is a cucumber, over and over again. At some point, the monkey on the right starts receiving a grape, a more desirable treat. Look at that. Monkey on the left sort of recognizes this and gets a cucumber again, literally is not sure what to make of it, sniffs it, and throws it back at the examiner. I mean, they were perfectly happy with the cucumber over and over again, but now the glaring inequality, the glaring injustice is obviously causing stress levels in that monkey on the left, because they now see that inequality face to face. What is interesting as you think about this experiment, Fareed, was that the stress levels went up in the monkey on the left. Subsequent experiments show that the stress levels go up for the monkey on the right as well. No matter where you are on the spectrum, it turns out, living in a society that has glaring inequality is bad. It's unstable, it's unsettling, and it's stressful. And that's part of what we saw.
You have a friend, you guys grew up in Michigan together, and you say he's a middle-class kind of guy, and yet he is more stressed than you, a brain surgeon who also has a CNN job. Explain how that could be.
Well, I think people tend to equate busyness and amount of work that you have to do with stress, and that's actually not as big a predictor, we found, of the sort of toxic stress that we're talking about. When you're sort of middle management or middle class, whatever, first of all, you could easily become upwardly mobile, but you could also become downwardly mobile. So you constantly have this sort of feeling of you don't know where you're going to go. That loss of control, that inability to feel autonomous with regard to your own destiny, that turns out to be very, very stressful as well. So people often think of the very poor, people living on the fringe, as having the most stress, and there's for lots of reasons they do. But if you're constantly worried about coming down or going up, you're not sure which, for my friend Frankie, that's probably the most stressful thing in his life.
Fascinating. Sanjay Gupta, thank you so much for joining us, and make sure to watch the documentary.
Thank you. Thank you for reading.
One Nation Under Stress premieres on HBO on March 25th at 9 p.m. Next on GPS, Ukrainians will go to the polls in just 2 weeks' time to elect a president. Russia is already meddling in the election. Will the vote be hacked? And what can America learn as it prepares for its 2020 election? Back with that story in a moment.
With Fidelity Wealth Management, you get straightforward advice, tailored recommendations, tax-efficient investing strategies, and a dedicated advisor to help you grow and protect your wealth. Fidelity Wealth Management.
I had no symptoms of hepatitis C.
Mine caused liver damage.
Epclusa treats all main types of chronic hep C. Whatever your type, ask your doctor if Epclusa is your kind of cure.
I had the common type.
Mine was rare.
Epclusa has a 98% overall cure rate.
I just found out about my hepatitis C.
I knew for years.
Epclusa is only one pill, once a day, taken with or without food for 12 weeks. Before starting Epclusa, your doctor will test if you have had hepatitis B, which may flare up and could cause serious liver problems during and after treatment. Tell your doctor if you have had hepatitis B, other liver or kidney problems, HIV or other medical conditions, and all medicines you take, including herbal supplements. Taking amiodarone with Epclusa may cause a serious slowing of your heart rate. Common side effects include headache and tiredness. Ask your doctor today if Epclusa is your kind of cure.
If you feel like you spend too much time in the bathroom with recurring constipation and belly pain, talk to your doctor and say yes to Linzess. Yes Linzess treats adults with IBS with constipation or chronic constipation. Linzess can help relieve your belly pain and lets you have more frequent and complete bowel movements. Linzess is not a laxative. It works differently to help you get ahead of your recurring constipation and belly pain. Do not give Linzess to children less than 6, and it should not be given to children 6 to less than 18. It may harm them. Do not take Linzess if you have a bowel blockage. Get immediate help if you develop unusual or severe stomach pain, especially with bloody or black stools. The most common side effect is diarrhea, sometimes severe. If it's severe, stop taking Linzess and call your doctor right away. Other side effects include gas, stomach area pain, and swelling. So say yes to help for recurring constipation. Yes to help for belly pain. Talk to your doctor and say yes, Linzess.
When you learn to dive in the Florida Keys, you'll encounter a 2,800 square mile national marine sanctuary filled with thousands of species of marine life. As you continue your education, you'll discover wrecks and environments beyond your imagination. Because here, you can get as deep into diving as your curiosity takes you. The Florida Keys and Key West.
I can do more to lower my A1C.
Because my body can still make its own insulin.
And I take Trulicity once a week to activate my body to release it, like it's supposed to. Trulicity is not insulin. It starts acting in my body from the first dose and continues to work when I need it, 24/7.
Trulicity is an injection to improve blood sugar in adults with type 2 diabetes when used with diet and exercise. Don't use it as the first medicine to treat diabetes or if you have type 1 diabetes or diabetic ketoacidosis. Don't take Trulicity if you or your family have medullary thyroid cancer, you're allergic to Trulicity, or have multiple endocrine neoplasia syndrome type 2. Stop Trulicity and call your doctor right away if you have symptoms of a serious allergic reaction, a lump or swelling in your neck, or severe stomach pain. Serious side effects may include pancreatitis. Taking Trulicity with a sulfonylurea or insulin increases your low blood sugar risk. Common side effects include nausea, diarrhea, vomiting, abdominal pain, and decreased appetite. These can lead to dehydration, which may worsen kidney problems.
I choose once-weekly Trulicity to activate my within.
If you need help lowering your A1C, ask your doctor about once-weekly Trulicity.
When Ukrainians go to elect their next president on March 31st, which is just 2 weeks from today, they will be faced with a list that started at 44 candidates and is now somewhere south of 40. The top contender is a comedian, and that is not a joke. The current president, Petro Poroshenko, is close behind, as is former Prime Minister Yulia Tymoshenko. There is also a candidate named Yuri Tymoshenko, and many observers believe the other Tymoshenko is there simply to siphon votes away from confused citizens who make the mistake between the two of them. That is far from the only trick that is being played in Ukraine's elections, and there are lessons to be learned as America prepares for its own presidential election next year. Jared Cohen joins me now. He is a former top State Department official who runs Jigsaw, which is Google's sister company that, among other things, works to combat fake news and hack attacks. So, Jared, Jigsaw is sort of like Google's geostrategic arm, and you are the CEO. Why would you go to Ukraine, of all countries?
Well, Fareed, first of all, thank you for having me. I think the question I would ask is, why would I not go to Ukraine? Ukraine is an innovation hub for the most nefarious cyber activity happening in the world. It's where you have innovation in disinformation, hacking of traditional systems and infrastructure, in addition to the deployment of these tactics in a military context.
Why? Why Ukraine? Why does it have all this?
Well, because right now we're all thinking about how do we protect democratic institutions? What do we do to make sure that there's not a repeat of 2016 in 2020? And my view is there's nothing that Russia will do to the U.S. that it won't do to Ukraine first and worst. And we're not going to solve the problem of how do we protect ourselves against hacking of the 2020 election by just analyzing the president or just looking backwards. We have to forecast what's going to happen. And if I'm going to forecast what's going to happen, my goal is to find the places that our adversaries are using as target practice.
So what did you learn? Because you went to Ukraine, you've been to the Donbass, to the part of eastern Ukraine that is sort of occupied by the Russians. What did you learn about what they're doing?
Well, first, we saw a number of tactics that we've never seen before. So we're seeing the systematic and customized targeting of disinformation on messaging platforms. It's very clear to me that the new front for disinformation is platforms where the barrier of entry is a phone number. It's much more believable if somebody's in your contacts list and you get information from them, you're much more likely to believe it. We're seeing the manipulation of audio and the spoofing of phone calls. We're seeing manufactured revenge porn, manufactured hacking of emails that then get dumped onto the public domain. And we're seeing a growing ecosystem of illicit merchants who are selling these capabilities to the highest bidder on the deep and dark web.
So when I hear all this, it sounds very difficult to figure out how to counter it. Do you think the American government is on top of this? Do you think the Trump administration is sufficiently attentive to it?
Well, I think that what's interesting about Ukraine is you have the convergence of foreign policy and domestic policy. From a domestic perspective in the U.S., we care about protecting the election, but Ukraine is a very important foreign policy priority. If we connect the two, all of a sudden we look at building resilience in Ukraine as a very effective way to protect our own election. And Ukraine has something very interesting. It has some of the most robust civil society in the entire world, but it's one of only 2 countries where it has world-class engineering talent who also understands geopolitics just because of where they live. Israel being the other example. The problem is civil society doesn't have the technology expertise, and all the engineers want to work in e-commerce, and they're losing the commercial advantage to Belarus right next door. So if you look at what the U.S. government can do, the U.S. government has lots of mechanisms to support civil society, lots of resources to support civil society, and it does it all around the world. But the U.S. government can bring those 2 ecosystems together and build world-class companies, invest in world-class capabilities to fight disinformation in Ukraine. This is already happening with cybersecurity. All of us rely on top world-class talent for dealing with hacking and traditional cybersecurity issues in Ukraine because they're the best in the world. The same too can be true for disinformation.
Do you think, though, that is the Trump administration sort of attentive enough to how malign Russia is? Let me ask you, does it strike you that this is all coming out of Russia, out of the Kremlin, and the attempt is to delegitimize the Ukrainian election?
There's certainly an attempt to delegitimize the Ukrainian election, and particularly at a moment when the Russians don't have a chance of having their candidate running too low in the polls. On the one hand, you have democracy working pretty well in Ukraine right now because nobody knows who's going to get to the second round, let alone who's going to win. On the other hand, that ambiguity makes it more of a target for Russia. What we're seeing also is the democratization of these capabilities. So the Iranians were all of a sudden, making similar attempts in the U.S. midterm elections. We've seen other countries get into the game. So, Russia has a particular focus on Ukraine, but the capabilities are going to be on full display for other countries to latch onto. And there's certainly plenty of countries out there that have an interest and an incentive to try to disrupt the U.S. presidential elections.
Let me switch to attacks finally. I just ask you, you watched the New Zealand attacks, of course, and you hear about how much of it was an online phenomenon. The terrorists were, in some sense, fed the stuff online, they posted online, and then they broadcast online. Does social media have a responsibility? How should we think about that online component?
Well, of course they have a responsibility. I mean, I think as I look at the horrific attacks in New Zealand, there's a long tradition of deeply disturbed people espousing hatred and then trying to engage in violent acts as a response. I think what's different in the social media era is the access that they have to niche communities that aren't constrained by geography, and the access they have to instant, superficial internet fame. I think those 2 incentives are new in the era of social media.
And sometimes, I mean, some of those niches that the internet has created a wonderful thing. I mean, it allows all the stamp collectors of the world to kind of reinforce each other and gain camaraderie, but it also provides this dark side for people who are demented.
Of course, and my view is, look, the internet to me is still a net positive. I'm an optimist about it, and I think that there's 2 things we have to be cautious about. One, not to neglect all of the benefits that come with the internet, but at the same time, I think that we need to be responsible and pay attention to these moments where we're seeing a darker side.
Fascinating. Jared Cohen, pleasure to have you on.
All right. Thank you, Fareed.
Next on GPS, the inside story of an earlier terror attack. It's now a feature film, Hotel Mumbai. It's all about the heroes of the 2008 attack on that city. I'll talk to the star, Dev Patel, and the writer-director, Anthony Morris, when we come back.
With as many as 1,000 guests and over 500 staff trapped inside.
A whole new way to care for newborns is born. Johnson's Cotton Touch Wash and Lotion, made with real cotton and enhances your gentle touch. A new soft, a new touch, a new gentle. Johnson's Cotton Touch. Choose gentle.
The Labrador Retriever and the Golden Retriever are very different. They eat, digest, and process energy differently. At Royal Canin, we developed over 200 precise formulas to transform every cat and dog into a magnificent animal. Royal Canin. Fact is, every insurance company hopes you drive safely. But Allstate actually helps you drive safely with DriveWise. It lets you know when you go too fast and brake too hard, with feedback to help you drive safer, giving you the power to actually lower your cost. Unfortunately, you can't do anything about that. Now that you know the truth, are you in good hands?
Touch shows how we really feel. But does psoriasis ever get in the way? Embrace the chance of 100% clear skin with Taltz, the first and only treatment of its kind, offering people with moderate to severe psoriasis a chance at 100% clear skin. With Taltz, up to 90% of people quickly saw a significant improvement of their psoriasis plaques. Don't use if you're allergic to Taltz. Before starting, you should be checked for tuberculosis. Taltz may increase risk of infections and lower your ability to fight them. Tell your doctor if you have an infection, symptoms, or received a vaccine or plan to. Inflammatory bowel disease can happen with Taltz, including worsening of symptoms. Serious allergic reactions can occur. Ready for a chance at 100% clear skin? Ask your doctor about Taltz.
When cravings hit back. Choose Glucerna with slow-release carbs to help manage blood sugar and start making everyday progress. Glucerna.
Pardon the interruption, but this is big. Now at T-Mobile, get the Samsung Galaxy S10e included with unlimited data for just $40 a month.
Tomorrow night, Senator Elizabeth Warren, a CNN presidential town hall, live from Jackson, Mississippi.
We are here to say enough is enough.
Jake Tapper moderates tomorrow night at 9 Eastern, only on CNN.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
What if you could lose fat in just a few hours?
I don't know what to say. I'm just in shock.
You can with Sono Bello.
It seems no matter how much you work out or diet, there are parts of your body that just don't seem to change.
I went to the gym, I worked out at home, I bought videos. No matter what I did, that bulge was still there.
With its advanced micro-laser technology,
Sono Bello gently removes that targeted fat and shapes your body for life-changing results.
With over 100 board-certified plastic surgeons, Sono Bello is the largest and most experienced group practice in the U.S.
Sin ain't believing. I don't know what is.
After 5 years trying to get rid of that roll of fat, Sono Bello did it in one day.
Call for your free no-obligation consultation today and get $250 off your Sono Bello body.
Payment plans are available.
Call 888-470-4969 or go to sonobello.com.
The Bush Years, tonight at 10 on CNN.
Closed captioning brought to you by TheraWorks Relief. Prevent and relieve muscle cramps.
I would get muscle cramps easily 4-6 times a week. TheraWorks Relief has made my workday muscle cramp free.
Get TheraWorks Relief today. Available in stores everywhere.
On November 26, 2008, 10 members of the Pakistani militant group Lashkar-e-Taiba arrived on the shores of Mumbai. Armed with guns, grenades, and IEDs, they stunned the city with a series of gruesome attacks at 6 separate locations. Reporting to commanders back in Pakistan during a rampage that lasted for 3